ad hoc live stream is something I'm just doing today, right now, off a whim. So I didn't alert anybody. So you guys may not have gotten this. Let me just say right now that Superman's now at 138 million dollars domestically. No one's tracking the international. We'll find out that next coming weekend. Upcoming weekend, we got Smurfs coming out. Uh, and Smurfs looks good. I actually think that's going to be an enjoyable movie. Unlike all the other movies that came out, I actually might actually go into cinema and watch Smurfs this weekend. So we'll see. Definitely not going to be watching the Fantastic Four though. Sorry about that. But Smurfs coming this weekend. I always liked Smurfs, and they talking about Smurf this, Smurf that. I might go in the theater and see that. Okay, so let's just look at the domestic here for a minute. So domestically, this is Box Office Mojo, by the way. When we look daily, it's 4 days now in. I wanted to show you a pattern though. Friday it was 56 million. Saturday was 37 million. Sunday was 31 million. You can see the numbers are going down. So the very first time when people went into cinemas to see it, of course, there's also the totals from, I believe it was early in the week, the Amazon Prime stuff that's added to the total. Anyway, the total at the end of Sunday was 125 million. And today, Monday, they added on an extra 13 million. So it's right now standing at 138, roughly 138 million, which is not bad. But there's a certain thing you have to look at. So basically, from Friday to Saturday, there was a drop of 33%, and then on Sunday, it dropped to 16%. So the bulk of the money that has been made is always usually made up front. This is like one of those front-loaded movies. Internationally, okay, so internationally, usually the international Kume should be higher than the domestic Kume. If you look at Man of Steel, for example, even though this came out, they staggered it. You can see that internationally, this movie made a significant portion more than the domestic. So with Man of Steel, what really carried it to the 670 million, it was 668, it seems that they updated it, was the international Kume. Okay. So anyways, what I'm going to talk to you guys, so this is a little update. Now, there's a couple things I want to say. I hear people saying that this movie will make, between 500 and 600 million dollars. That's a big if. That's assuming that both internationally and domestically, this movie on the weekends has a drop of about a 40% to 50% drop. Okay. All I say 40% to 55% drop. Anything above that, whether it's internationally or domestically, if it drops off significantly in this second weekend, it's toast because Smurfs comes in, and then the next weekend it's going to be Fantastic Four. So the time for it to rule the box office is now. This week here, it has to make as much money as it can because you just never know. Smurfs can just take over everything, and Superman could just be swept under the rug. And definitely, Fantastic Four is going to come into the picture, and that's why people were talking about Superman not being positioned in front of all these movies. But it is summertime, so this is what happens in the summer. So anyway, its overall Kume, therefore, is what it is. So the weekend Kume was not, it was 122 million, but it just got 3 million more, so it's 125 million that it's at right now. Now, people say, well, Superman projections, what could it be like, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to break it down for you very simply, okay? So let's say this is the weekend here, okay? During the week, it's going to gross some money, right? It just, as you saw, it grossed about $13 million. And as the week progresses, it may go up or go down. It depends, right? But on average, 4 days of the week is what we're looking at. So we just had Monday, there's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we start with the weekend, which is Friday. So if you look at those 4 days of the week, and let's just say 13 million a day, which is not bad, by the way. You multiply that by 4, you will get 42, sorry, let me see, 52 million. All right. So you take that 52 million, you add it to the weekend. The weekend, let's assume that Warner Brothers is right. They get they get 45% drop. Okay, which is very decent. That means Superman has legs. It was good word of mouth, whatever. All right. That means that the domestic on this weekend here, which is 125 million, right? A 45% drop of that, and I can do a calculation to show you something. So even I want to show you something because this is the best case scenario, right? Let's say, like I said, it's a 40 to 50% drop. So we do the average, which is 45%. So let's say you had a 45% drop, right? That means you dropped by $101.25. Let's just say $102. So if we were to add 225 million, this is the actual amount that you would have garnered. And this is excellent. If this ever happens, no, actually, sorry, I'm wrong. Okay. No, let's say internationally and domestically, because I did it wrong. Actually, I did this horribly wrong. Let's try this again. So domestically, right? You made 125 million. My bad. But you had a 45% drop. Okay. So that'll be, you dropped by 56 million, basically, right? I'll round it off to the nearest whole number. So now you have to subtract that from 125 million. And this is the actual amount you got, 69 million. Okay. So if you go into the box office with $69 million domestic, plus you have $52 million domestic during the week, that's pretty good. You add 52 million to that. Shit. Hold on a second. And again, okay, there you go. You will have made 120 million in addition to whatever your box office was locally, which would have been 125 million. Shit. That's 120 million plus 125 million. Okay, round up. So you'd end up domestically at 245 million, which is excellent. This is like the best case scenario you could possibly have with this movie, right? That means the movie has legs, right? And it came in and it competed with Smurf, and maybe it's even the number one movie because it grossed so much over the weekend, right? Right. So 245 million is what you would domestically be at. And then internationally, let's say the same thing happens internationally. So internationally, you have 95 million by 45% drop. That's 42 or 43 million that dropped there. And you subtract 95 million from that. This is what you actually had, 52 million internationally. Of course, during the week, it also garner. It's going to probably be less than what the 52 million that we got domestically, because internationally it's not doing too well, right? So maybe let's say you get an extra, let's say extra 30 million, right? Oops, I messed up again. Right? You end up with an extra 82 million internationally. Okay? In addition to this is really good. Okay, I'm not saying this is what will happen, but I'm just saying this is really good. And you add this up to the 95 million, you end up with 177 million internationally. That's not bad. And of course, we just said 200 and what do we say? 200 and something, 220 something million or something like that. So this is extraordinary. This is the situation you want to be in, right? 200 and what is it? 42 million or something like that. Something like that. So you end up with 419 million at the end of 2 weekends. That's the ideal situation. This is what they want. Okay? Because after Smurfs, it's all over, right? Let's say it conquered Smurfs, it did better than Smurfs, and it's dominating and it's going along, right? This would be the ideal situation. Now, we know that's not going to happen because, one, internationally, it came in lower. and it's almost dead in certain countries. In certain countries, it didn't make any money whatsoever. And so, I think that internationally, there's going to be tremendous drop. This is going to be a tremendous drop off. Domestically, I think it will hold a bit, but I think internationally, I don't think right now it's going to do well. Period. It's not doing well in China. It's not doing well in Europe, in Spain. It's not doing well in South Korea. I mean, really not doing good. I mean, in France, it's not doing well either. England, the UK, which, we would think you would have the best chance of something doing well. Germany's not doing, so it's not doing well globally. And I can show you actually the actual figures because Box Office Mojo has that. So let me just show you guys the figures here somewhere. One second. Right. So you can see United Arab Emirates, it opened to $2 million. Croatia, it didn't even open to $1 million. Iceland, no. Latin America, it opened in Colombia, it opened to $1 million. We don't have anything for Brazil, none of those other places. So you can see that, China, it didn't do well at all, and so many other places. And this is just a testimony to the fact that this movie, at least internationally speaking, people don't like it. They really don't like this movie internationally. Now, on the domestic level, it seems as though it's doing a lot better, but we don't know how much longer it will do better because the kinds of reports I'm seeing people doing reviews on this movie. There's a significant portion of people who say it's just a ball of crap. They don't like it. They just don't feel it. Some people are saying it's a mid movie. So some people are saying it's mid. Some people are saying it's crap. And the more this movie plays in cinemas and the more people go to see it, is the more people are going to say that. Because again, there's a lot I want to say about this, but the first thing I need to say about this is you guys call this a Superman movie. There's a guy who reviewed and said, this is not Superman. And he explains to us why. He said, James Gunn did something to be able to allow him to do the kinds of movies he does. James Gunn is known for team up movies. He's known for ragtag groups of misfits. And if you look at his movie and even the heroes of the movie, look what Green Lantern he picked. He picked Guy Gardner because he's more of a ragtag misfit kind of guy. All right. He shaped Hawkgirl into this kind of misfit, killing people. Mr. Terrific is more in line. He's more like Superman, kind of like. But even so, it's still sort of a sort of misfits thing. So what this guy said, and he's very insightful in what he said, is that the Superman movie, James Gunn did not allow Superman to be Superman in this sense. Superman should be able to, at least in one or two instances in the movie, save the day by himself. But if you look at this movie and how Gunn conditioned everybody, the first thing we see, the first image of Superman in that movie is him being hurled to earth and being beaten up. And he's beaten up throughout the movie. And the only time he actually gets relief is when some other character comes to his aid to save him. Superman's like the damsel in distress in this movie. Yeah, I was listening to a lot of people saying, oh, this is Superman movie is a movie showing how young men and young boys should be. This is the movie showing masculinity. This is the most emasculated Superman I've ever seen. Okay? Superman is yelling and losing his cool all the time in this movie. He doesn't have his shit together at all throughout this movie. And that's not a masculine trait. What makes a man is the ability of him to control his emotions, to be cool in very, very difficult situations. And this Superman, it's weird to say this, and I haven't seen the movie, but I've been listening to the reviews. I watched the trailers, and this Superman is a Superman who gets overwhelmed way too much. And he does not know how to deal with people who are critically assessing him. When Lois Lane is really going toe to toe with Superman, arguing about his involvement in the issue that's happening in the Middle East and why has he chosen to go that route, what he doesn't want to be, he does not want to be analyzed, assessed, and criticized for it. You know, he keeps on yelling, well, it's the right thing to do. No. Life is not like that. You can't just say it's the right thing to do, even though it could be the right thing to do. We need to have some back context. If somebody's talking to you and interviewing you and asking you rationale behind your actions, the action of it's the right thing to do and people didn't get hurt is not a concrete answer. You should be able to go into the nuts and bolts of something. And so James Gunn plays this Superman as always needing help. And that's how he's able to make this team movie, you know, the super gang, the justice gang, whatever the fuck they're called. And we know the movie's kind of idiotic, period, right? But it's one of those movies where Superman is not Superman. And one of the things about Superman, and you know what's weird? According to the people who have seen the, shall I say, the epilogue, right? The prelude to the movie, the writing and stuff like Star Wars. It seems as though they say Superman is the strongest, he's the most powerful being on Earth. They say that, but then the movie does not show that. The movie doesn't show Superman as the most powerful being on Earth. He gets beaten up by just about everybody in the movie. And the question is, now, the only thing that James Gunn had saving grace with Superman is he actually shows Superman saving people or saving squirrels or saving a dog or saving a child, right? So we see him saving people. That does not mean that people are not getting killed in this movie. That does not mean that there wasn't mass damage like in Man of Steel, okay? There was tremendous mass damage in this movie. The movie was choppy, but it was a lot of damage. But I have something to show you guys. So let me go show you right now, because these are very important things that a lot of people are, you know, they're short-sighted in. And I want to show you something that will help you understand Superman and how Superman should not be a parody. This movie was a parody of Superman. And a lot of people will be annoyed that I say this, but I will show you why. Richard Donner. Okay. So Richard Donner was being interviewed by RF. RF says, right, now when he did come into your life, this is Superman, again, many, many years later, in your view, going into this project, who was Superman to you? Who is Superman? What qualities did you feel needed to be there to really capture the character well? Richard Donner says, well, the qualities were really our heritage, because the interesting thing is I had no eyes to do a movie called Superman. But when it was sent to me with a ridiculous offer, I took it upon myself to read it, and I was very disappointed because they were making a parody out of something much like American history. Let me say that again. I took it upon myself to read it and was very disappointed because they were making a parody out of something much like American history. I mean, this was something that in the 30s, kids were brought up on, and it stayed with us right up until the time I read the script. It was still being published, and I was angry that they were disrespectful to the character. So I accepted the assignment only on the basis that I could rewrite it. Do you hear what he said? Disrespectful to the character. In the end of Superman 2025, Supergirl comes down. She's drunk. She gets crypto. And as she's leaving, she says, bye, bitch, to Superman. Superman does not reprimand her for being drunk. He does not try to reprimand the dog for being wild. And Supergirl leaves and curses Superman, and Superman does nothing about it. When Krypto first comes to save Superman, who has been badly damaged after he slams into the snow, what does Krypto do? He jumps all over him, he pulls his legs and stuff, and Superman's like, ow, 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 and it's made fun of. Superman is being made fun of. James Gunn is making fun of Superman. The outfit that Superman is wearing that looks weird and stupid, James Gunn is making fun of Superman. When Superman is dealing with, the clone of himself, who is supposedly this armor guy of Arabia, whatever the hell his name is, Baravia, whatever they call it. He's being beaten up by Lex Luthor. First of all, Superman has super speed. I guess in this universe he doesn't have super speed. I don't know what's going on there. But for some reason, Lex Luthor actually has super speed thinking or something, and he has super speed instructions. So he can give instructions so fast that the clone of Superman, which is apparently he's brainless or something, he has to get these instructions to be able to fight Superman. It's just retarded, but whatever. As I said before, it's a parody. It's not supposed to make sense. So it's a mockery of Lex Luthor using a puppet or a proxy to do the damage. This is the whole parody that's going on there. And Superman gets beat up by this proxy. But here's the thing that I find interesting. Superman is saved time and time again by the Krypto, or he's saved by Mr. Terrific, or he's saved by Lois Lane. Lois Lane actually kind of helps to save him with Mr. Terrific and so on. And it's just weird that Superman, who usually saves people, has to be saved. And even when he's saving people, okay, he's saving people, but what does that have to do with the actual battle? He's losing that battle. So it's one of those things where you watch it and are you serious? This is getting super duper duper weird. I know. Okay, yes, he's getting saved by all these different people. I don't even know if the stream is working right now. I don't even know if I have internet connection. Can you guys see me? Hopefully you can see me. I hope so. So anyway, Superman so they're making a parody on something much like American history. This is Richard Donner. I mean, this was something that in the 30s, kids were brought up on and stayed with us right up until the time I read the script. And it was still being published. And I was angry that they were disrespectful to the characters. So I accepted the assignment only on the basis that I could rewrite it. So James Gunn there is being very disrespectful to Superman. He brought in the writer, Mankiewicz, to rewrite it. Once it was decided upon, I was committed to the project. There's some dogs barking in the background. Sorry about that. Greenberg says, was there something specific about Superman that you felt needed to be in that movie? A certain trait or personality? Donna says, there's a thing that I call verisimilitude. Right, I was going to get to that. By that I mean that within its own reality, it was extremely important that the characters in the story believe themselves. The minute they didn't, like I said, it became a parody. And that's really like a parody on a parody because it's a comic book. Now, that's a very important point that I try to get people to understand. And that is that what James Gunn did is a parody. You know, what he did is a parody of Superman. It's not Superman. And I'll tell you why. Because Superman's not being Superman. He does a couple things. He saves a couple people, but he's not saving the day. And I'm not saying he shouldn't have help, but the way how they've done it, it's like he can't handle any situation without having help. And yes, he's a young Superman. He hasn't been in combat or whatever. This is his first time having combat or whatever, just like the Flash in Joss Whedon's Justice League. But nonetheless, he's Superman, meaning that when you look at the character that is playing Superman, what that David Cornsweet is playing, you can see him throwing his hands up in the air a lot of times in conversations, particularly where he's confronted and where he has to find answers. And he's yelling. He's always yelling and screaming, even in the last, his little epilogue, or not epilogue, but his little, what's the word I'm looking for? His little talk to Lex Luthor. He's yelling and screaming. He's always yelling and screaming. And that's not something of Superman. That's not Superman. Superman doesn't yell and scream all the time. He does yell and scream at times. But for the most part, Superman doesn't yell and scream. And even if this is a developing Superman, and this is James Gunn's take on Superman, you just don't see that. The other thing about Superman that is not a typical classic thing is that Jor-El and Lara, or whoever the wife is, they didn't say the name, wanted him to come to Earth to conquer it. So even though Krypton was being destroyed, they were talking to Kal-El before he leaves, and the message they are giving him is that, you are there to conquer Earth and to, fuck as many women as possible, which was just crazy to hear that. But again, I'm not saying that it is something that is not, it's not exactly what happened in Smallville. In Smallville, Jor-El was evil. I think also in Supergirl, there was an evil Jor-El as well there with Superman, when Superman had to fight him. I think something like that. So I'm not saying they're not iterations of evil parents, okay? In fact, I think in Supergirl, if I'm not mistaken, Supergirl's mother was evil or something like that. So it's possible, okay? What I'm saying, though, is when you put that into the lore, you have to follow it up. You see what I'm saying? If you're just using that as a way to make a joke, which is what James Gunn does, he's all about jokes. So he's looking to make a spoof. So, like, for example, what happened with Krypto, where Superman, because it's mostly Superman in the movie. Superman is giving this spiel to Lex Luthor, and then Krypto comes in and just starts to rip up Lex Luthor, and Superman's not doing anything. He's not trying to stop Krypto from doing that. He's just yelling at, "Hey, Krypto, stop." That's all he's saying. And again, I don't see Superman doing something like that. And I can see that James Gunn shaped Superman. He twisted Superman. He morphed Superman into an image where he could do the Star-Lord thing, or he can do the, Peacemaker thing with him. And so that's why Superman's yelling all the time and stuff like that. That's not Superman, right? Superman doesn't yell all the time. Superman's not that guy. And it doesn't matter what stage of his development. If you watch if you read the John Byrne comics, if you read any kind of comic, Superman can't lose his composure. The reason Superman can't lose his composure is because if he loses his composure, he could do massive damage because he's very, very strong. And in this Superman, he's losing his composure way too much. And then when he's supposed to, because Superman's that kind of guy, a matter of fact kind of guy, when he's supposed to tell Krypto to behave and to get in line, he's not doing that. Right? This is a Superman who can't control. If you cannot command respect of a dog, how are you going to command respect of a league that you're going to run? Superman is the head of the Justice League. Superman is the head of, So if Superman can't even command that respect of a dog and has Supergirl calling him a bitch, how's he going to command that respect? And this is another thing about a man or a woman. You should be able to command that respect because you behave in a respectful manner to everyone. And on top of that, you also don't tolerate certain things that are disrespectful. And so that aspect of Christopher Reeve, when you look at Christopher Reeve's Superman, how he deals with the criminals, how he deals with, General Zod in there, you can see he's the protector of Earth. You can see he's standing up, and he's a matter of fact kind of guy. If you don't do this, then so. This is the consequence, and I'll have to enforce it. You could see Superman's that kind of guy. He likes to give you warnings first before he proceeds with things. He's kind of by the book kind of guy in a way. This is not there in that Superman. That's why I said I understand it's Gunn's Superman, but it's not really Superman. And that's the problem with Gunn's movie, because he's trying to squeeze out the last dregs of jokes that he can get out of characters. He doesn't care who they are. And James Gunn already told us he thinks the stupidest thing that's ever been made are comic book characters, are superheroes. He said so. But he says he can take that and still push forth lessons out of that, because he says he loves them to death, but it's really, it's ridiculous. And he tries to bring the ridiculousness out of situation. And he doesn't care about the characters. See, Richard Donner, he treated Superman like a sacred thing. He treated Superman, you could see his love for Superman and how he was very respectful of Superman. And that's why everybody loves Christopher Reeve's Superman to this day. If you go and watch back that old, and then the other thing about Richard Donner is he really tried to make you believe the reality that you're looking at on the screen. This was a very important thing to him. And you'll see Zack Snyder say the same thing. They do it in different ways, but nonetheless, they want you to believe what's there. All right. James Gunn doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about you believing and buying into these characters. He cares about the humor of the thing. He wants to show you the humor in the situation. And then from that humor, he wants to give you a lesson that in spite of all of these flaws of these individuals and in spite of everything that's going on, here's the truth. So that's how James Gunn approaches things, which is why he doesn't really care for Superman like that. He's doing a Superman movie, but doesn't really care for Superman. He really cares for Mr. Terrific, which is, you got a sequel off of him, Supergirl, he focuses on the dog, Crypto. He really focuses on other things. And even though this is a Superman movie and people will say, oh, it's a Superman movie, and Superman's a part of the movie, but it isn't the focus of the movie. He's not the focus of the movie. This is a team movie. This is like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like Star-Lord is supposedly, the main character in Guardians of the Galaxy. But, everybody gets their share. And it's really about the Guardians. It's not about Star-Lord. Well, this movie should have been called Justice League Gang or Justice Gang. It should have been called Justice Gang, featuring Crypto, because this movie really, it's more of an ensemble movie than it is about any specific person. Superman has a lot of runtime in it, but he's not the major guy. It's like they play off all these other characters. Mr. Terrific had a great, run. Lois Lane had a little something to do. Crypto stole the show. That kind of thing. So, and Superman's in there, but he's not the focal point. This is not really about him. This is more about, how can this ensemble help to stop the threat that is in front of it? It's an ensemble. The Justice Gang, does a lot of stuff in this movie. Right. So having said that anyway, I think the movie's a parody because it disrespects Superman. That's why I said it's a parody. Not only does it disrespect Superman, it does it to get a joke. So Superman is not Superman. Superman is not the Superman or the Superman you've seen in all the other iterations before, on screen, live action, or in cartoons, right? Superman in the beginning of this movie is the same Superman at the end of this movie. He has no growth whatsoever. So there's no developmental story. It's not like Superman's developing and, like what Zach did, or even what Richard Donner, to a very limited extent, did with his first Superman movie and then into the second Superman movie where Superman was evolving. Superman's not evolving in this movie. Okay? So he's really used as comic relief for Krypto. He's a straight guy, but he's comic relief. And that is a parody. And this is what Warner Brothers doesn't understand. You've been giving us parodies of Aquaman. You've been giving us parodies of Blue Beetle. You've been giving us parodies of The Flash. You've been giving us parodies of Wonder Woman. You've been giving us parodies of Shazam. And Shazam is a funny character, don't get me wrong, but it's still a parody. You're giving us constantly over and over again, Birds of Prey and so on. You're giving us comedies. And in the comedies, they're not really doing anything in the comedies. You know what I'm saying? You look at Hawkgirl. Hawkgirl kills a man because the guy is thinking that she's like Superman, right? Superman kills his clone, and he also kills some of the people who, Lex Luthor was putting on him, the soldier people. All I'm saying is that James Gunn is willing to break whatever rule he needs to break to get the result he wants, because he's a comedian and he's into comedy. And as such, Superman is disrespected. And this is the thing Richard Donner was very protective of. And in fact, the reason he was fired was because he wanted an evolving Superman. And they fired him off of the second movie. He had done 2 movies at the same time. I want to show you now what Zack Snyder says. I think with Superman, we have this opportunity to place this icon within the sort of real world we live in. I'm going to skip down to people even saying that people don't really like that. I was surprised that people still cling to the Christopher Reeve version of Superman, how tightly they cling to those ideas. Not really the comic book version, but more the movie version. If you really analyze the comic book version of Superman, he's killed, he's done all those things. I guess the rules that people associate with Superman in the movie world are not the rules that really apply to him in the comic book world, because those rules are different. He's done all the things and more, what we've shown him doing, right? It's just funny to see people really taking it personally, because I made him real. I made him feel or made consequences in the world. I felt like it was the same thing in Watchmen. We really wanted to show it wasn't just like they thought, like the PG-13 version where everyone just gets up and they're fine. I really wanted to show violence is real. People get killed or get hurt. It's not fun or funny. This is very important. Zack Snyder is doing something else here. And this is the thing that James Gunn tramples on. And the execs love it because the execs like a joke. They like to make fun of things, just like James Gunn. It's not about being just funny and doing things at the expense of the characters, and not only at the expense of the characters, but at the expense of young, impressionable minds in children seeing these things and feeling there's no consequence to them. You see, when the big monster goes through the middle of Metropolis, all these buildings are falling down and stuff, Superman can't save everybody. A lot of people died. And what made this reality unbelievable is people pulling out the cameras in the midst of danger and filming it instead of going away. And that's not our world. James Gunn thinks that's our world, but that's not our world. People will run when they realize it's too close, no matter how dependent we are on our phones. And I guess for me, it was like I wanted a hero in Superman that was a real hero. Sort of reflected the world we live in now. So Zack Snyder also wanted you to believe that Superman was real, just as how Richard Donner wanted you to believe that Superman could fly. And this was real. He didn't want you to feel like it was fake in any way, shape, or form. And Zack Snyder took it to the next level in saying, I want people to relate to a Superman as if he existed in our time. So that's what he did. So he made Superman as real as possible, the violence as real as possible, the consequences for that as real as possible. And that's why everybody was up in the arms at the end of Man of Steel, which makes sense. People felt it was real. It was very impactful to them, and that's why people reacted the way they did. So let's go back to here. So we talked about best case scenarios with this thing. I think this thing's going to fall off. Internationally, it's certainly going to do that. But I also think domestically it's going to do that because I see the numbers falling already. And I mean, I'm giving a lot of more credence to this thing than I need to, but this is a heap of trash, as everybody said. It's not, no, don't tell me it's a good movie. Don't tell me it was an enjoyable movie. Don't, I mean, you could say that if you want, but you have to switch your brain off to say it's an enjoyable movie because everything in this movie, if you just think about it, makes no sense. Like, for example, Lex Luthor has this elaborate plan to, get land in Baravia, to set up Superman, to make him look bad, supposedly. He's trying to do a BVS route with what Lex Luthor did in BVS. But he's also borrowing from Superman with Lex, taking land and stuff. And he has this elaborate plan, where, he goes into the Fortress of Solitude, steals files, tries to find some dirt on Superman, finds some dirt, broadcasts it to the world, and turns the world against Superman. When, in fact, he sent this clone to Baravia, wherever it is, and the clone was a clone of Superman. He already cloned Superman. I thought this movie was going to be a good Superman and a bad Superman, meaning the Ultraman is really the clone. And the clone's going out there and doing all kinds of things, and people thinking it's Superman. I mean, that would have been a much more clever way to go. It's much more direct. You don't have to, all this thing with going to the Fortress of Solitude to find Superman. He finally finds where Superman is located and all that shit. That don't make no sense. You had a clone. You cloned Superman. And apparently you cloned the engineer and all these other things. So why is it that you didn't use that clone to paint Superman in a bad light? That's what I never understood. Like, he went through all these acrobatics to pin on Superman. Superman ends up fighting the clone anyway. Ends up killing the clone or getting rid of the clone in a black hole. And at the end of the day, you didn't think of using the clone to put Superman in a bad light? I mean, why didn't you just do the clone? And it never made sense to me, but it is what it is. So I'm just showing you the story has a lot of plot holes and just, it's crap. It's a shitty movie. It's trash. It's the same thing like Aquaman 2, Blue Beetle, The Flash. It's the same thing. It's the same people. Peter Safran's still there. When you stay, you're going to start afresh. You need to start afresh. Like, you're going to start DC all over. Don't start with anything that was previous. You just do a clean break, reset, and just start all over. They didn't do that. And Gunn's bringing things across. I think Peacemaker was in this movie, etc. So, best case scenario, this movie, at least in this next weekend, could make somewhere upwards of $400 million. Worst case scenario is that by the time this weekend comes, because of Smurfs and so on, Superman is knocked out of the number one position. Even though I don't think that will happen, I don't think Smurfs will open with more than $50 million. But who knows, right? If Smurfs opens domestically with more than $50 million, then Superman is going to get toppled, right? Worst case scenario is the movie only makes, after the end of the weekend, it only makes like 120, 130 million extra dollars. So it ends up at 300 and something million dollars global. That's the worst case scenario. Even if it's, if it's like high 300s, like 393, 394, that's at the bottom of the barrel, but it needs to make some money in the second weekend. So if it doesn't, it's toast. Anything north of 55% decrease in weekend box office, it's toast. So it has to really do well. A 55% drop is the limit. You go past 55%, this movie's toast, right? So we'll see. I don't know. I see a lot of dissent online about this movie. I'm not gonna lie to you. These are the actual numbers for Man of Steel, as you know. Man of Steel, not adjusted for inflation, 128 million. Adjusted for inflation, 177 million. It would have opened to, because why we adjust for inflation is because of the amount of tickets that would be bought. Man of Steel sold a certain amount of tickets, so to adjust, that's why you adjust for inflation, to see how much more did Man of Steel sell. Superman opened at 125 million, not 123, but 125, and so its box office is better than almost all the DC movies in the last 5 years, except for the Batman. Its opening box office has been better than them, but you know, comparatively to a 12-year-old film like Man of Steel, it did not open very well. And we're going to see if what's going to happen over this weekend and then over the next weekend. Those 2 weekends, the first 3 weekends tell you everything you need to know. By the second weekend, we know how it's shaping up. So we're about to find out that. And yeah, that's why I said it's not Superman as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Okay, so let me show you some other things. The Marvelous Mark says, now tell us why you got fired. James Gunn said he didn't feel guilt leaving Marvel for DC. I was fired. So apparently he was removed from DC. After he did the Guardians of the Galaxy 3, they kindly got rid of him. So I think Disney didn't like that he was involved in those weird tweets, and they were going to get rid of him. The fans were able to hold him back for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and that was it. He was off and running. So, make of that what you may. Okay, Logan says, imagine if Snyder comes out and praises how much he loves it. What would the cult do then? So, if Snyder comes out and praises Superman, the movie, well, that's his opinion. I mean, he praised Wonder Woman 1984. You know, I personally thought it was shit. You know, Zack Snyder tends to be a guy who likes to encourage people and push people onward. And he likes to see the best for people. That doesn't mean we have to follow in like step. 28 likes. You guys don't remember Blue Beetle? We're not a cult. Yeah, we are not a cult. We don't just blindly follow a leader. We don't do that. Restore the Snyder Cut.
Release. Jackson had sung about Palestine before.
Hold on a second. Release the Snyder Cut. He's back on popping, man. It was good to see him. He says, educated people in educated nations making educated decisions. That is, Superman in Spain hasn't made much money. That's basically the long and short of that. Michael Jackson wrote a song, Palestine Don't Cry, that Sony refused to release. A few months later, the allegations about him came out. And this is the video talking about that. Clark grew up with 2 of the goodest boys, Hank and Dusty, man's best friend. Yeah. So he had 2 dogs. One died while he was still alive, and the other one kept on going. Dusty's the one that Martha puts inside the U-Haul. Okay. There's a new Shazam level of flop coming, Supergirl. So this was Shazam. And I'm telling you, man, Supergirl is Shazam. They're doing the same thing. She's drinking, I guess, alcohol or whatever. Look out. So, oh my God, they're still going with the comedy route. Oh, this is gonna suck so hard. So they're not learning. Warner Brothers is not learning their lesson. Every guy who loves Superman suffers from chronic emasculation. Superman gets disrespected so much in this movie. That's the only explanation. That's correct. Because once again, I have to say this. I have to say it. This is not a role model for little boys and young men. This is not. That is not how a man reacts to different situations. He doesn't throw his hands up in the air. He doesn't yell and shout and scream. He doesn't cry like a bitch. And Superman is a bitch in this movie. And Supergirl's on point with that because he's a beta male in this movie. And that's not cool. And that's not Superman. Hamad, I promised myself to delete Twitter yesterday, but now I'm seeing the discourse slowly shifting to if Superman is going to make as much as Superman Returns. All right. Race Flores says, reminder, they're rooting for Snyder to fail in 2017. It's the same people who did that are asking the Snyder fandom to just fall in line. Yep. China also mentioned that James Gunn's Superman is Goyim slop that has no power here. China has also officially banned OnlyFans, calling it an immoral and corrupt Western dump. Film Glove added that on. Okay. And there you see it tanked in France, it tanked in Spain. One of the most historic Hollywood studios in WB have hit desperation levels you wouldn't think possible. What a colossal disaster. Superman has led to a 513% increase in Google searches for adopt a dog near me. So Superman is known for Crypto, the super dog, not Superman. That's what I'm saying. He plays second fiddle to everything. Okay, this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to do a little bit on Free Palestine.
This Superman right here does a lot in the movie. You see him do a lot, right? This is an established Superman. He's been Superman for 3 years. Henry Cavill, we just see him at the very beginning. He really doesn't do much, but when he does anything, really, he just seems like Superman.
Here we go again.
I think we can all agree as a movie, right? As a movie, Man of Steel is a better movie than James Gunn's Superman. As a movie. I'm not talking about the future of the DCU, everything else, the characters, everything. I'm just talking about as a movie. Man of Steel was made better, I believe, than James Gunn's Superman. And what I mean by this is, when you see Man of Steel, when you watch this movie, you feel like you're watching something epic, something cinematic. Right? I ain't gonna hold you. There were many times as I was watching this movie, which I don't think it's a bad movie, where I'm like, is this a CW show? You know what I mean? Is this a CW show? Like, what are we doing here? Like, Hawk Girl, the Green Lantern. I mean, it just seemed kind of cheesy at times. And Superman, this version of Superman doesn't seem as epic, as grand as Henry Cavill's Superman. I mean, he does very little. This Superman right here does a lot in the movie. You see him do a lot, right? This is an established Superman. He's been Superman for 3 years. Henry Cavill, we just see him at the very beginning. He really doesn't do much, but when he does anything, really, he just seems like Superman.
All right. He seems like Superman because he is Superman. He's not just doing things and he's not just doing things because, you know, the hero does something. You know, Christopher Reeve said something that's really true. Christopher Reeve said that, you know, Superman isn't just about being a hero, you know, saving cats out of trees, saving kids, that kind of thing. Superman comes from a certain place, an immigrant, an orphan, someone who has been, you know, knows what it is to be different, an outsider. So that's why Superman welcomes people. That's why Superman embraces mankind. That's why he embraces his parents. That's why he embraces. So you're coming from that perspective. You're not coming from a perspective of, you know, I'm the hero. You know, this is the right thing to do. And I'm the hero. It's not that. I have compassion because somebody had compassion on me. I have no mother. I have no father. But somebody adopted me as their mother and father, and it happened to be humans. So I'll do the same. I pass it on. So how Superman was raised and how he how he values people and life comes from that place. Okay. So when Crypto is pulling his leg and he said, Crypto, ow, 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 that shits on what Christopher Reeve was speaking about. Because Superman wouldn't react the way how he reacted with Crypto. Because he's coming from a place where he's been reviled. He's been seen as the other. So he understands how Crypto is, and he would speak to him in a language that Crypto would understand, even if it's an animal. Superman crashes at the Spanish box office. The film grosses less than expected, and Warner Brothers is in trouble. The DC and James Gunn film fails to shine in Spain. Warner Brothers is facing production that isn't making the expected profits. Is Superman a box office flop in our country? They call us crazy when we even share and collect facts. We're not here to share bullshit. And the reality of it all is that Rotten Tomatoes is not going to pay the bills. He's right. Experience the #1 movie in the world. And Autono Free Palestine says define world. Meaning many countries it's not the #1 thing that's going on there. And as you can clearly see, all these movies come ahead of Superman. So, you know. So, DC Universe Daily says enough time has passed. The actress who played Lois Lane in Superman is greater than the Lois Lane that played in Man of Steel. Both are great, but nah, I like seeing Amy's Lewis do more investigative journalism herself. I agree. Amy Adams, Lois Lane is underappreciated. She's fantastic, and she holds her own, and she always gets the story. She always gets the scoop, which I find very good. All right, let me just round this off. Repeating a lie doesn't make it true. Budget is not 225. It's at least 360 million. Superman crossed 270 million globally. Budget was 225 million. And it's not 225 million. It's actually 363 million, if I'm not mistaken. DC is repeating itself just to be mediocre again. Peter Safran, Walter Armada Part 2. Here we are, guys. Yeah, it's the same shit. They have no imagination. They borrow ideas from other people. And so the movies are flopping.
People.
Okay. So, for those of you that know, Syria is under attack by Israel, and nobody's saying anything. I think the United Nations Secretary of State, he said something. I think a bunch of countries are coming together to figure out how they're going to take action against Israel because America's not doing anything, at least their government. Thomas Massey says, we all deserve to know what's in the Epstein files, who's implicated, how deep this corruption goes. And it's 5 p.m., ladies and gentlemen. I haven't finished my drinks and stuff. Symbol of hope versus the symbol of enslavement and freak-offs. Yeah. In Kal-El's Man of Steel, the S on his chest, the glyph, stands for hope. In James Gunn's Superman movie, that S on his chest stands for what? Sex? What the hell does that stand for? Jesus Christ. Was it even Kryptonian? Clark holding up that oil wig with fire raging around him. No suit, no spotlight, just pure Superman, saving lives before the world even knows his name. That's how you introduce a hero. Yep. Because Superman needs to do Superman-y things. Otherwise, he's not Superman. So I'm going to stop here. Partisan 2.0 says it might reach Man of Steel. This movie is flopping. Yeah, we know that already. Israel killed Assad in Gaza today. They dropped a bomb on the tent where he was hiding. He was 8 years old. And you can see he's a Batman fan. The amount of death and destruction that this Zionist institution has been doing and is doing in the Middle East. Now they're bombing Syria again and talking about getting rid of the head of ISIS there, even though he complied with everything that they asked. Just shows you that Israel doesn't give a fuck about whether you side with them or not. They're just on domination, taking over the Middle East and becoming a hegemon there. And so, yeah, they need to be stopped. They are a rogue state and they need to be stopped. And a lot of Israelis are leaving Israel, so it's about time. Empire Allies says Israel or ally. What has the Zionist entity ever done for America and Americans? Except spend our money and cause us trouble. With allies like Israel, who needs enemies? 100%, this is Antonio Guterres. I am alarmed by continued escalation of violence in Syria and unequivocally condemn all violence against civilians. I condemn Israel's escalatory airstrikes and reports of the IDF's redeployment of forces in Golan. I call for immediate cessation of all violations of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So, here's what Mr. Guterres said. So he at least said something, but they haven't been saying a lot about a lot of things, like what's happening in the West Bank. Nobody's talking about that. They're talking about Gaza a little bit, but again, it's a genocide going on there. I tell and I encourage each and every one of you Free Palestine people to ramp it up and to make sure that stuff circulates in the media all the time. Chinese Foreign Minister says Trump does not represent the American people, but only Zionist interests. This is correct. Chinese Foreign Minister is getting it dead on correct, man. Shout out to him. Okay, people, I'm out of here. I will catch you guys later.